All right, let's take a look at the Hall of Fame ballot. And remember, fans, your pal Sully is a big Hall guy.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Blue Sky, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. You could start the season with a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I want to take a look at the Hall of Fame ballot because ever since the whole not wanting to vote for people with PEDs raised its ugly head a few years ago, the ballot has been insanely backlogged. And quite frankly, it's made the Hall of Fame process it's a little bit insane each year because there's the possibility of electing lots and lots of people. And there are people sitting on the ballot who I think have clearly had Hall of Fame careers, but we rub our hands and wonder what we should do about them. Um, I think the ship has sailed about worrying about performance enhancing drug use in the Baseball Hall of Fame. We already know there are a couple, David Ortiz has dirty tests linked to him, and I'm the biggest David Ortiz fan you'll meet. Ivan Rodriguez was linked to many steroid discussions, including the very ones that have kept Barry Bonds out of the Hall of Fame. And there was no shortage of whispers about the likes of Piazza and Bagwell, two people who absolutely belong in the Hall of Fame. And I just think at this point, you kind of almost have to grade on a curve. If you're letting in people who some we know have had dirty tests, and some we know have had, I don't know, some damning suspicion already, then the ones who also have dirty tests and damning suspicion should probably be let in at this point. And maybe you just are saying we're only going to have the best ones, only the best. And that's the reason why I think Bonds and A-Rod belong in the damn Hall of Fame. Now, Bonds is not on the ballot. Now, I do firmly believe, and we'll get to the veterans ballot in just a minute. I do firmly believe that the A-Rods, the Clemens, the McGuires, the Sosas, and the Rafael Palmeiros of the world will eventually get into the Hall of Fame. It will take a while. It may be a Minnie Minoso situation where you have to wait a whole damn long time. Maybe it's a Ron Santos situation where you have to wait for them to die. I never understood why it took Ron Santos so long to get in, but I digress. Eventually, there will be a writers and veterans committee. I guess I should have said veterans committee that will put these players in. I also think the more of the classic old timer Hall of Famers die off, the more likely some of the ones in the PED bandwagon will be let in because there'll be less of an outrage of, oh, you can't have Bonds on the same stage as Henry Aaron, yada, 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 yada. And, well, we're starting to see more and more that the classic old timers are dying on us. And the ones who take great offense of sharing a stage with A-Rod will eventually be reduced to Derek Jeter. But we're going to take a look right at the people who are some first timers on the ballot include CC Sabathia, Ichiro Suzuki, Ian Kinsler, Dustin Pedroia, Felix Hernandez, Curtis Granderson, Troy Tulowitzki, Russell Martin, Hanley Ramirez, Adam Jones. I forgot Adam Jones even retired. Brian McCann, uh, Carlos Gonzalez, Cargo, and Fernando Rodney. Fernando Rodney with his cap askewed. Here's how crazy this is. I took a good long look at this. I said, Fernando Rodney, he pitched in the World Series with the Nationals. That was only last year. That's what this decade is doing to all of us. 2019 seems like it was last year. That was kind of eye opening to me when I saw Fernando Rodney is on the freaking ballot because it was like, wait a minute, that was only it's going to be 2025. This decade is almost halfway done. Um, First things first, let's take a look at the newcomers to the Hall of Fame ballot. Um, for the likes of Fernando Rodney, congratulations. You may get a charity vote from a writer. You're not going to the Hall of Fame. Carlos Gonzalez had a terrific career, great years with Colorado. Toodaloo. Brian McCann, solid veteran. By Adam Jones. They love you in Baltimore, and well, they should. You seem like a good guy. Toodaloo. Hanley Ramirez, for a while, looked like he could be a legit MVP candidate and had some wonderful years with Florida and was a rookie of the year and got some big hits and big home runs along the year. By Russell Martin. Why did he have a J Martin on the back? I keep forgetting the reason for that. I don't know, but it won't be on his Hall of Fame plaque. Toodaloo. Ben Zobrist. Well, you'll have to go live the rest of your life knowing you were a World Series hero and the MVP when the Cubs finally won the World Series. You got back-to-back World Series rings with Kansas City Royals and the Chicago Cubs and had a fabulous, fabulous career. Arrivederci. Troy Tulowitzki, early in his career, looked like he may have been an interesting case. He was an MVP quality player out of the Colorado, great shortstop, could put up some big offensive numbers in Denver. Injuries caught up to him. Bye. Curtis Granderson, wonderful career with multiple teams. And he is someone who will be looked upon as a beloved player in a couple of different franchises. Probably, we know he's got a broadcasting career, may have a coaching career, one of the good guys in baseball. Bye. All right. Those are the simple ones. Nothing against any of those players. Obviously, if you played long enough to get your name on the Hall of Fame ballot, you had a wonderful career and nothing to be ashamed of. Toodaloo. None of you are going to get the Hall of Fame. The first one, and by the way, I'm doing this. I'm at baseballreference.com, the single greatest website in the history of the planet Earth. And I have the Hall of Fame ballot, and I have them in descending order of career WAR. That's what I'm looking at here. Just not that I use WAR as the end all be all, but as this is a good way to sort of organize it and take a look at it. Okay, the next one on the ballot, who's a first timer, is a very interesting one, and that's Felix Hernandez. And Felix Hernandez could very well be in that Oral Hershiser, Ron Guidry, Dave Stewart, Brett Saberhagen category. Fernando Valenzuela is in that category too, of that player who had a terrific peak. His peak was fantastic, but it wasn't long enough. Felix Hernandez looked like he would have had an outside chance to win 300 games because early in his career he was a 12. By age 20 he had won 16 games in the majors, 19 wins in 2009. Even the year he won the Cy Young, where he was 13-12, he was still on a terrible Mariners team, racking up double-digit wins left and right, and he was nearing 200 wins right around the time he was approaching 30. And 200 wins seemed like it was one or two big seasons away from happening if he stayed healthy into his 30s. Well, as it turns out, he fell far short of that, 169 wins. And his peak was really about 5 or 6 years with the Seattle Mariners. And his peak was fantastic, but it probably isn't enough to be a Hall of Famer. Beloved Seattle Mariner, no doubt about that. but probably not enough to do that. Then you have the two second basemen who won World Series rings with the Red Sox. Dustin Pedroia, who did all of the hard stuff. He was an MVP. He was a World Series hero. He got huge hits, was a beloved player on the Red Sox, and was a career Red Sox player, but wasn't enough to be a Hall of Famer. I think the injuries caught up with him. And, while he picked up 2 World Series rings for his troubles, his peak was pretty much from '07 to 13. And, okay, 2016, he was still really good. By 2017, the injuries had caught up, and then by the time he was 35, his career was over. He had a couple of outstanding seasons, and the rest of the time he was excellent. Beloved Red Sox player, retire as number 15. I think he's going to come up short. And when you take a look at his career numbers, he pretty much matches with Ian Kinsler, who again picked up a World Series ring when he was the second baseman for the 2018 Red Sox. Played a bunch of years with Texas, bounced around a little bit between the Tigers, the Angels, and the Padres at the end of his career. Again, had a solid Gold Glove, All-Star, World Series champion career. Not quite Hall of Fame level yet. All right. Now, then you have Ichiro Suzuki. Yes, should be unanimous. And then some other interesting cases. And when we come back, I want to break down some of those interesting cases and see if this is going to be as crowded a Hall of Fame ballot as I think it very well might be. Hey, let's hear a little bit from our friends over at FanDuel. Now, the NFL season's wrapping up. And are we going to have yet another Kansas City championship? I don't know. Neither do you, but you can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get 150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more at the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Now, Ichiro Suzuki, as I mentioned before, has ticked every box. If you have a problem with Ichiro, I just beg you to find something in your life that gives you happiness. He hit every career mark you would want as an offensive player. He didn't walk enough. Okay, great. He did everything else. He also energized the league. He was an MVP and an all-around great player. All right, put him in. CC Sabathia is a first timer on the ballot as well. And I absolutely believe he is a Hall of Famer. I think he's one of the last aces that we've had, like a true ace, someone who ate a lot of innings and oddly is in better shape now than he was when he was a player. I'm guessing Monjaro. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but he played his 11 years with the Yankees. It's funny. I still associate him with the Cleveland Indians, and that's what they were called then, because that's when he burst onto the scene in 2001 and looked like he was going to be the final piece of that puzzle. Remember when they kept going to the playoffs in the 1990s, the one thing they really lacked was that absolute dominant ace. They had good pitchers, to be sure, Dennis Martinez, Oral Hershiser, Jared Wright, Charles Nagy, Bartolo Colon. They were all good pitchers on those teams, but they didn't have that one knockdown, drag-out ace that you needed. And the very frustrating thing, if you're a Cleveland fan, was that Pedro Martinez changed teams, Roger Clemens changed teams twice, Kevin Brown changed teams 3 times. Uh, there were who are other great? Randy Johnson changed teams 2 times. All of these teams saw ace pitchers, legit ace pitchers, bounce from team to team. Even Jimmy Key, who may not have been the Hall of Fame ace that some of those other players were, certainly had a peak where he was in the conversation. And none of them landed in Cleveland. If just one of them landed in Cleveland in, say, 97 or 98, then Cleveland wins a title. They came 1 inning away from winning a title anyway. But just as that run was ending, the last year that run happened was in 2001, was the rise of CC Sabathia. He was 20 years old, and by the time he was 21, he was posting 210 innings and winning big time and striking out a lot of batters. And by the time it was 2007, they were back in the playoffs. He was a Cy Young Award winner. He was rented by the Brewers, who he took to the postseason basically on his own. He threw 7 complete games in 17 starts with the Brewers. The Brewers treated him like a rental car. And then everybody, and I mean everybody, thought he was going to go west. He talked about his love of the West Coast. He was born and raised in the East Bay, and he wanted to continue to be able to hit because he enjoyed hitting while he played his half season with the Milwaukee Brewers. And the Dodgers at the time were a contender and really, really could have used one more big pitcher in that rotation. Nobody knew that Clayton Kershaw was about to explode at that point. But even if you had Sabathia and Kershaw back to back, that would have been pretty good. The Dodgers probably would have won a pennant under Joe Torre. But remember, the Dodgers were run by the McCourts at the time, and the McCourts were running the team into the absolute ground. And so they didn't sign CC Sabathia. It would have been interesting if he'd gone to San Francisco and he would have joined the Lincecums, the Canes, the Bumgarners, and all of them. But it's safe to say that era worked pretty well for San Francisco. Instead, he signed with the Yankees, and he wound up playing 11 years with the Yankees. 11 years, putting up Cy Young caliber numbers and giving them 200 innings left and right. And his first year at Yankee Stadium, he won the American League Championship Series MVP and helped pitch the Yankees to the last World Series they've won to date. And he was an unbelievably likable guy, dealt with some off the field issues, including his own alcoholism, and showed that he was a person of great integrity and great charity and great dignity. He did everything you'd want on the field and off. And oddly, the guy from Vallejo, California, really, really, did I mention really embraced being a New York Yankee. Believe it or not, they may have to retire 52, which is odd because there are so many numbers that they already have retired. It's hard to believe that there's anything left. Now, Sabathia and Ichiro are all but guaranteed to get in on the first ballot. There's a couple other, nobody else is. I mean, as I said, the closest ones would have been Felix Hernandez and Dustin Pedroia, but and neither of them are getting in. But Ichiro and CC are going back. There are some who are still on the ballot who I think really, really should be brought in. I mentioned A-Rod, and there's some other ones we got to talk long and hard about. I think the fact that the Yankees have retired every number and yet number 13 was still available for Jazz Chisholm is an intentional middle finger to A-Rod. A-Rod is the greatest third baseman in Yankee history. He's one of the greatest players in Yankee history. And he carried the Yankees to the postseason in 05 and 07, and they don't win the World Series without his heroics in 2009. He was a PED user. Yep. So was Pudge Rodriguez. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. If you're going to make the case that you're going to keep some players out who are on the periphery in the PED era, I understand that. But A-Rod is not on the periphery. He belongs in. Neither is Manny Ramirez, for that matter. Now, Manny doesn't seem to care, but his career, PEDs are not multiple. I know he's not getting in because he's got multiple tests. I believe he should be in because he was a great player who was one of the best players of his generation, which I think should be the main criteria of putting players in the Hall of Fame. I know he's not going to. I would vote for him. Absolutely, I would. I know he's not getting in. The numbers show he belongs in. Also, Billy Wagner's on this 10th ballot. And while people aren't always sure what to do with closers, Billy Wagner is certainly, I think, one of the great closers of all time. And he got 73.8% of the vote the last time. He needs 75. I'd be stunned if he didn't get in. And quite frankly, I'm all for, as I said, I'm a big Hall guy. So I'm all for Billy Wagner getting in. Now you can convince me. So the ones I would vote in are Manny, A-Rod, Sabathia, Ichiro, and Billy Wagner. Now you can convince me about Carlos Beltran, who had a terrific career, kind of snuck up on me. I always thought he was a good player with a couple of great years. And then you look at his whole career and go, oh man, he may be a Hall of Famer. I'd like to have him on the ballot so I can hear debate. Same thing with Andrew Jones. Andrew Jones is on his 8th ballot. I'm leaning towards him. Not 100% there yet. Also with Chase Utley and Bobby Abreu, I'll listen to the conversation. Absolutely, I will. Now, I'd mentioned before that there are 5 players on the veteran committee vote that I would let in, including Dick Allen, John Donaldson, Vic Harris, Tommy John, and Dave Parker. I think Louis Tiant, kind of like Felix Hernandez, falls short in that his peak was incredibly high, just wasn't long enough. But think about this for a second. Anyone who has huge objections to Manny Ramirez and Alex Rodriguez being elected to the Hall of Fame. If you're going to do it, you're probably best doing it in a year that's super crowded, that there's other people to celebrate, that can kind of get lost in the proverbial shuffle. Although I would love to hear Manny Ramirez's Hall of Fame speech. If I had my way, there would be, say it with me, 10 Hall of Famers being inducted next summer. Dick Allen, John Donaldson, Vic Harris, Tommy John, Dave Parker, Manny Ramirez, CC Sabathia, Ichiro Suzuki, and Billy Wagner. All 10, all the living ones are, you would have 7 living ones and the descendants of the 3 who we have lost. I think that would be an amazing day in Cooperstown. And for those of you who are not happy with Ramirez or Rodriguez, don't worry. It's a crowded day. They're going to cut their speeches off anyway. So I'm sure some of you disagree. I'm sure some of you are huge Andrew Jones and Carlos Beltran fans who could absolutely convince me. I'm sure some of you don't think Billy Wagner belongs in or thinks I'm being too generous. That's a distinct possibility. But as I mentioned, your pal Sully, I'm a big Hall guy. So we're going to see what happens. Next week, the veteran committee vote is going to happen. And then in January, we're going to see the Hall of Fame vote. And we will see what happens. I'm all for it. So follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now, and on Instagram. You can follow me. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball and Blue Sky, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Going through the Hall of Fame ballot, giving you my thoughts and telling you I'm pretty generous about the whole thing. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.